for example, who are now the majority in the workplace. They have overtaken, as of last summer, the summer of 2015, millennials overtook Generation X in the workplace. And so if you're marketing to them, if you study millennials, they want and get their information from peers, and that's how they make decisions on products, on where to go get a pizza. And so it fits to me with what you read, because they're constantly on these social media platforms with other people that are their set of friends and more, and that's where they're deciding what as a consumer that they're going to buy, eat, go to as a venue to have fun, all of it.
Right, so that goes back to what we said in the very beginning. Marketing now is a conversation.
Yep.
They want to feel like you as the business is basically having a one-on-one conversation. We're friends, BFFs on Facebook, and you're sending me a food picture, and you're like, oh my God, that's awesome. So, and that is where you see a lot of times, if you have your core audience, they will treat you as friends. Like we've seen it, and I'll talk about some of the review sites and everything else. We a lot of times see basically friend behavior when it comes down to reviews and that kind of stuff, and that goes all down to this new dynamic where people they're no longer interested in me standing here talking at you. They want me to talk with you. And that's somewhat the biggest difference that social media has produced, is just the way people communicate. So, that's a lot of times people are like, okay, so where do you find this stuff? If any of y'all are interested in some news aggregators, which is basically those are news feed websites. I have an app called Feedly on my phone, which I can say, okay, so I want a restaurant/food feed. I want a small business feed, where I can then basically, when I get up in the morning, that's one of the first things I read, just to kind of keep track of those latest trends. The next Pokemon Go will probably be on that app before it's ever going to hit the news. Some of the new dishes that we see in restaurants, that's where you get some of these sort of insider tips, if you will. Just by having a news feed that is curated by some company, and it takes, let's say, 20 of your industry publications that are interesting to you, and it puts them into a daily news feed, and then you basically, first thing in the morning, you're flipping through, you're like, interesting, interesting, interesting.
What's it called?
Feedly, Feedly. And like I said, that's an iPhone app. I don't think it actually costs anything. If it does, it's free. What else can you ask for? Speaking of free things, if you don't have a Google alert for your business and for your personal name, you probably want to set one up. What Google Alerts do is anytime your name or your business name shows up in the news, Google will send you a message. Since I do my share of political consulting, I have basically for all of my candidates, I will set up a Google alert, so therefore if I have somebody in the news, if my name is in the news, if any of my clients' names are in the news, Google is like, hey, Tobias, there is a news article that contains the name X, and they send me a message. Now, a lot of times that is something that you can then instantly turn around and share it on Facebook, tweet it on Twitter, whatever social media channel you're on. It starts helping you generate that content that is relevant right then and there. Which, again, that is what social media is all about, is the relevancy. You want to be able to, you don't want to be like, oh, by the way, so 5 days ago we were in the town talk. Nobody wants to hear that. It's only interesting if you're in the town talk right now. So that's sort of the social thing, and Google Alerts very much, and again, it's a free service. It doesn't cost you anything, but they will basically, anytime your name is in the news, your company's name is in the news, that's how you set them up. and they send you an email. I mean, it's super useful for people like me who are always sort of scouring for content. Besides, you always want to know when your name comes up in the news. Just saying. And that's where some of the what we call trend spotting, or you saw a minute ago in the video, newsjacking. That's two of the sort of latest things that people do. Trend spotting obviously is you trying to figure out what the next thing is. So whether Pokemon Go hits the street, you want to be there the first day. Because if you're there after a week, then it's like, oh, they're doing some kind of Pokemon Go thing too. You don't want to be two, you want to be first to market. That's one of the most important things in here. When it comes down to newsjacking, if Donald Trump says something stupid on TV tonight, you have the cupcake to go with whatever stupid he said tomorrow morning, then you're going to sell a bunch of cupcakes. That's basically the way that's how it works. And for what it's worth, if Hillary says something stupid, the same thing applies. And very equal opportunity when it comes down to that. So whatever happens to be relevant at the time, if it's the VMAs or whatever else, if something happens that is relevant, if you can take advantage of it, if you can be the first one to tweet something to Rihanna, then that may very well benefit your business. If you happen to have something, let's say you have a exhibit at the museum that happens to tie into a current event, then that can be super valuable, because then you can talk about it regarding something that happens to be in the news anyways. That's what we call newsjacking, if you're basically then generating something or inserting yourself into the news conversation, which some of the big brands are really, really good at. So, that's something where obviously you want to be kind of careful, you don't want to be tasteless about it, but it's certainly something that can be done very effectively. Once you have figured out what your content is, timing does matter. If you own a nightclub and you're posting things on Facebook at 8 a.m., your audience is probably not going to be there. Same thing if you're basically dealing with business people, then posting stuff on LinkedIn when they're at home in bed is probably not very efficient. So you do want to somewhat be aware of who your audience is and post on Facebook accordingly. I had a conversation with somebody the other day about a downtown event, and she's like, oh, I'm posting it in just a minute. And I'm like, it's Sunday night at 11 o'clock. I don't think anybody's going to be real on Facebook to see it, and by the time people get on Facebook the next morning, it's basically already sliding down the news feed, and you're having to spend more money to actually boost it to kind of lift it back up. So that's something that you always want to be aware of, is when most of your people are on Facebook. The trick is Facebook will actually also tell you if you go into your insights on your Facebook page. Facebook will tell you when your people are looking at your page. So one of the things that they're, again, very good at is to sort of feed you those statistics. If you have employees that are what we call Insta-famous, we have a bartender at the restaurant who has like 4,000 followers on Instagram. So whenever we're like, hey, we have a new drink, it's not just, hey, we have a new drink. It's, hey, we have a new drink that Andrew made, because then all his 4,000 followers are all like, oh my God, Andrew. So it works very well for us. And you would be surprised how many people are actually Insta-famous. I have a friend of mine in Dallas, and she was suggested as a friend on Instagram, and I'm like, okay, she has 89,000 followers. What gives? But clearly it's a thing. I'm told there's a YouTuber here in town. Basically, all her videos have between 700,000 and 1.5 million views. And she talks about making edible blenders for your face. It's beyond me. Again, YouTube works strangely sometimes, and I forget what her thing is, but I mean, she lives here somewhere. She has this huge following on YouTube, and it's a thing, and I'm from from what I know about YouTube and how they pay, she probably makes $2,000–3,000 a video easy. You might want to become YouTube famous, just saying. So, but if you have those people and you know that you have somebody that has a large following, involve them. Because for one, it helps you spread your message, and it helps you develop those new audiences that you may not otherwise get a hold of.
Yeah, fitness is really big on Instagram, by the way. I mean, you
Right.
know that. Like, that's a lot of Insta famous fitness people.
Well, and that's, you know, and it's something that people the fitness people are clearly into that. So, you know, where everybody else here in the room might be like, well, Instagram 2% really not my thing. If 100% of your audience is on Instagram, then clearly that's someplace where you want to be. So, you know, you do always have to be careful somewhat whenever you're doing promotions online. You know, Facebook for a while, it used to be like and share this post to do blah, blah, blah. We did one with a bakery one day, and it was like and share this post to win a king cake. And, you know, we've done them before where it was like, you know, do this and win a king cake. And, you know, Jennifer would call me the next day, and she's like, okay, so we have 50 people, draw a name, fine. So one day we did this like and share this post to win the king cake. Jennifer calls me and she's like, we have a problem. I'm like, okay. She's like, we have 1,600 shares. I'm like, I would probably give away more than one king cake. So, you know, it used to be a thing for a little while. Before you do stuff like that, make sure you check their terms of service, because there's some things that you're not allowed to do. Facebook will not let you do the like and share to win anymore. It's something they did away with for probably very good reasons, because you would get all this garbage on your newsfeed where everybody wanted to win some teddy bear or whatever. So that's no longer a thing, but there are certainly some promotions that you can do where it's like, okay, so it helps you propagate your message, if that makes sense. So, you know, if you're saying, hey, I'm just kind of starting out with that, I have 200–300 followers on Instagram, or I have only 1,000 people that are fans of my Facebook page, then you might want to come up with something that is engaging like that, where it's like, okay, can you share us with your friends? There's nothing wrong with saying, hey, share this post. And we've done that quite a few times on Facebook. Just asking for it actually works. If you give people a clear path to what you want them to do, they strangely comply. If you're like, hey, share this because we're trying to spread the message, that's what they end up doing. Some of the things that we always hear about Facebook and about some of the other online review sites, be it Yelp, be it, there was, Urban Spoon if you're in the restaurant business. People get really, really upset when somebody leaves a negative review, and people will do that. People sometimes get terribly upset about stuff. There's two things that you definitely want to do. You always want to reply, and if it's just, hey, I'm sending you a private message, and you apologize and whatever else. Rule number 2 is don't do it right away when you see it. Because there's nothing worse than you reading a negative review and you're like, oh, let me reply to that, you son of a... So that's usually not the way you want to react. So I always tell my clients you have to have a cool-off period. It varies from person to person. I can usually cool off in 10 minutes and say, okay, let's approach this calmly. Some of my clients basically need like a day away from social media just to... Every negative review tends to, for them, is basically like a personal slap in the face. Usually what happens is once you listen to whoever has a complaint, I don't advise people to say, hey, sorry, we screwed up, because sometimes you don't know if you screwed up. But you can say, hey, I'm sorry this happened. Let me find out, when did it happen? Sometimes it's better to reply in a private message. Sometimes it's better to reply in a public thing. We just did a week at a resort in Mexico, and I looked at their Facebook page, and somebody's like, yeah, the water was just too cold when we went. And I'm thinking, yeah, that's a stupid thing to say. But the resort was like, okay, well, you know, we're so sorry you found the water to be too cold. If you want the water to be warmer, then we suggest you come during this time of the year. Which was a great way to reply because A, they said, hey, we're hearing your complaints and we're suggesting something to remedy that other than us actually heating the ocean. So, you know, it's very important to really reply to these things because you don't want somebody to say, well, you know, we complained and nobody heard us. And most of the time when people complain, generally in business, they just want to be, first of all, they want to be heard. Secondly, the worst thing you can usually do is say, hey, let me give you everything for free, because if you ask them and say, hey, what can we do to make it better? What if they say, oh, well, you know, can I get 20% off? And I've seen that happen, where it's like, oh, I want 20% off, and I'm thinking, well, shit, I was about to give you the whole thing for free, so I still made 80% of my money, and, you know, clearly for them it wasn't that big a deal. So you want to have a conversation with people. A lot of times, even if they're really, really pissed off, sometimes your customers will actually come to your defense and say, oh, well, you know, I understand you had this experience, but this is really a good business. I've seen that plenty of times where, you know, and I try to read reviews for places where we go. And sometimes you see, especially if you have a good relationship with all your customers, they tend to end up coming to your rescue and actually taking up for you, which is a great thing. I mean, it's always better for somebody else to sing your praises than you to sing your praises. Sometimes you deal with misperceptions. And, you know, again, a example for the bakery. At one point, there was this rumor going around saying they're getting their cakes in frozen, which it's like, okay, that doesn't really make any sense. That's a grocery store thing. But instead of us saying, hey, we're not, we started posting pictures of the bakers picking the cakes out of the oven and mixing the batter and that kind of stuff, which turned around the whole rumor because people are like, oh my God, they're baking their stuff and blah, blah, blah. The other thing was it gave people the proof that it wasn't true. So if you're dealing with misperceptions like that, whatever they may be, sometimes it's a whole lot easier to just post proof that it's not true. So that's, as far as the pitfalls, of course, there's a lot of times there's really good reviews. We do it for our employees. Whenever somebody leaves a positive review on Facebook, I screenshot it and send it to all the employees just because it's a morale thing. I mean, people love that kind of stuff when it's like, oh, such and such was a really good waitress, or you guys have the best blah 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 in town, or, you know, I had a really good experience. It encourages the employees to do a much better job. So that's something that we found for us to be very valuable. Plus, it gives you feedback. Sometimes some of these comments actually lead to change inside of your company. So, and, you know, that's always a good thing. So, you know, whatever happens on Facebook, you want to make sure that you respond to it. You step back, say, okay, so what really happened? You know, a lot of times when we do it in businesses, there's video watching involved. It's like, okay, what exactly happened? You know, especially if somebody at the restaurant every once in a while will get somebody that's like, yes, we waited 2 hours for our food. So then they watch the video and they like waited 30 minutes for their food. And then it's like, okay, I'm so sorry that you feel that way. But it wasn't really. You don't want to argue with them, but you want to be able to at least have the information, and that would be something that I would probably handle in the private message. If it's like, so hey, we waited 2 hours, and you're like, okay, that would be like very unusual. So you want to sympathize, you want to apologize for the way they perceived whatever happened. Sometimes when it's true, you just have to say, you know, I'm sorry we screwed up. And that tends to go a long way. We've seen that where if something really went wrong and we're like, you know what, we screwed up and we're sorry, that goes a long way for the customer and everybody that's watching the interaction. Because sometimes there are situations where you just have to say, you know what, we screwed up.
Do you respond to the positive comments that are on Facebook or something like that? I
We
mean, like if someone-
usually, anytime somebody checks in or somebody leaves a positive review, we try to make sure we respond, just say, hey, thanks. Or we appreciate you coming in, or, you know, just a something where people are like, oh wow, they're actually listening, because again, that's what they're looking for. They're looking for that interaction. So whenever we do that, or if somebody's on Facebook saying, so hey, how much is this product? Then you want to be able to jump in. Or the other day we had somebody that was like, oh, that looks really good, I wonder how much it is. And we're like, oh, that's $3. And they're like, oh, we didn't realize you were here, so sorry for hijacking your newsfeed. And we're like, no, it's going fine.
So if somebody leaves a negative review and it's false and you aren't supposed to publicly correct them, how do you void out that comment so it doesn't make you look negative to other people that can see that comment?
Depends on what it is. For example, a lot of them actually have policies where if you're like, okay, if you approach it as it's false, usually they're like, well, we don't really want to get involved in an argument, like Yelp will do that in a heartbeat. If you're like, well, that's not true, Yelp's like, well, you know, c'est la vie, that's the way it is. Now, if you say, hey, Yelp, I don't think that customer actually wasn't our business, Yelp will usually pull the review, which sounds counterintuitive, but it's, you know, sometimes you can, in other words, you can remedy that situation by disputing what they left. Sometimes it's best to say, okay, so, you know, we sent you a private message and handle it that way. That way at least people say, they see the negative review, but they also see that you tried to do something about it, which helps a whole lot rather than it just kind of being out there in cyberspace, if you will. Sometimes they're, you know, I've seen reviews myself where it's like, you read them and you're like, okay, clearly there's nothing we can do. And, you know, those happen too. That's why there's very few businesses that have a totally clean record, because there's always that. What I usually tell people is the one thing that the restaurant business has taught me is that I don't like people as much as I thought. It's one of those things, I mean, some people you just can't help. We had a bad review left by somebody at one point that built their own pizza and then was like, yeah, the pizza didn't taste right. So I looked at it and I'm like, well, given the ingredients, I'm sure it didn't taste right. But they built their own. If you would have eaten one of ours, it would have been a totally different story. So that's just one of those things where, you know, sometimes, and I know it hurts to leave them out there, but I mean, unfortunately, sometimes there's really nothing you can do about that one negative other than encouraging the customers that love you to go out there and leave their positive one. Because I mean, if you have, let's say you have one star and 1 5-star, then your average is 3. If you get 2 more people to leave a 5-star review, then all of a sudden you have 2, 3, 5-star anyway, so you're going to end up with a 4-star average, according to what I just did in my math. So, you know, and we've done that. It's like encouraging the people that actually like your product to leave a positive review. Sometimes it's the easiest way to remedy whatever went wrong,
That way it
because,
just outweighs the negative.
right. Because some people get so pissed off, there's really, you could be like, yes, okay, I got it the waiter, and it's still not good enough.
Just this week, we had somebody just felt the need to point out that our upcoming beer event is not very family friendly. I was like, oh, I mean, yeah, that's valid, you know. I didn't want to ignore that, so I used it, and I used it as a way to promote our family classes and Second Saturday Market.
Right.
So,
Well, there is a point where it's like you sit there and you're like, okay, you have to very much make peace with the fact that you cannot be, not everyone can be your client. That's just the way it is. Sometimes you're too pricey, sometimes you're too cutting edge. Whatever it may be, sometimes you're just not willing to bend over far enough to make them happy, and that's okay. I mean, that's a very much a, you know, the museum is, I think, does probably more stuff for families than most other places, and it's like, okay, so you want to complain about a beer event, I'm sorry.
yeah.
We had, I'm also part of the downtown revitalization effort, we had somebody was posting on Facebook, they're like, well, you know, the jumpers and the face painters was just not enough for my kids. And I'm thinking, well, I'm terribly sorry. I mean, what do what do you want me to do? Unless you're paying for something else, I really don't know how to help you.
We actually had an inter-office conversation about that very conversation today, because it happens, you're gonna.
Well, I mean, it's like, and then you get to a point where it's like, you know what, from now on, we won't be advertising the face painters and the jumper anymore, because I don't want you to come out and be disappointed. You know, there's a point when it's like, okay, the right comment at least will point out that we're being a little bit on the assy side. And I do believe that every once in a while you just have to like, you have to do a little social media karate and just disable somebody. Not saying that you want to do that often, but every once in a while it's called.
I think retaliation is completely appropriate.
Well, like I said, if you deal with the general public long enough, that is what you will find. Other than that, that's pretty much what I have. Yes, I'm working on a book. So if anybody has any questions, for one, my phone rings basically 24/7. My cards are back there. They actually have my cell phone number on it, which I've only regretted once or twice. My website is at the top. If you want to head over there and sort of subscribe to one of our newsletters, that's something where every once in a while I'm like, hey, there's some cool shit out and I really want you to know about it. And clearly I don't know how to wash my mouth in public most of the time. Which, interesting enough, whenever I asked Deborah to promote that, it turned into unsticking your business. So that's more of where you, depending on the channel in which you talk to people, you might have to change your message just a little bit. But it's certainly something that you want to keep in mind whenever you have like people that are a little bit more on the appropriate side. I'm clearly not one of them.
Tobias, that's not very friendly.
I know, it's
Catchy. It's yellow, bright, and catchy. That's good. I like that. Great marketing on that.
it is catchy, and that's what counts. So actually I expect that out to be probably in the October-November time frame. So that's something that I've been working on, and I'm pretty excited about it, especially because there's lots of business that I get lots of business owners in coaching that basically they're like, you know what, I basically cry myself to sleep at night because my business, even though I have customers and I have everything else, it's just not working for me. And that's sort of how this program was born, because those people need help. Other than that, if anybody has any questions, now is the time. Other than that, I think we have maybe some food next door, if we get lucky.
Yes, we do have Embers next door and a couple other items and drinks. If anybody wants to stay and network, pass around business cards. It's the first room to the left when you walk out. I'm actually going to stand at the exit if y'all want to pass me your folders with your registration and evaluations filled out. And then we can go ahead and start our networking hour. Thank you so much for coming.
And the
And if anybody did not sign in, I have the clipboard right here on the podium. Please sign in next to your name.
She's saying you will be tackled on the way out. Y'all are way too quiet.
It's a long day.
Do we have wine next door?
Some expired. Scott knows how. Thank you so much.
It was someone else in the question. Well, that's probably related. Stop.
Yeah, give us a call, and also.
I outsource some stuff. Sometimes I wish there was somebody over there. Outsource because, you know, my business is related. So, I guess.
This is too tall, I can't
I like the small print where it says you got 12 minutes to fill that out. 12-minute bird.
Oh, it does. Where did I see that at? It's on this
very
one.
bottom. On one up.
What's that?
Yo,
The estimated
12-minute
burden
burden.
of it? Oh my goodness, you have to read this disclaimer. Read the bottom.
Sounds like a lawyer wrote that.
I wouldn't be surprised. The 12-minute one.
Wasn't really changing it.
Yeah, it's been a long day.